Hey guys, welcome to our daily encounter. The book of Ruth begins with a very tragic story, especially for Naomi, one of the characters in the beginning of the book. She has a husband by the name of Elimelech, and then also two sons, Machlon and Chilion, and they undergo a great famine in their land, in the land of Israel. And so they go to the land of Moab to seek refuge from the famine. And while they're there, Naomi's two sons marry two women from Moab, Orpah and Ruth. And it ends up that Naomi's husband and two sons all end up dying. And so she's left with her two daughter-in-laws. And so she's hears that the famine was gone in Israel and she wants to go back. Naomi does. And so she tells her daughter-in-laws that they should stay where they are. They should stay in the land of Moab. That Naomi had nothing to offer them. She had no other sons. And even if she had a son, it'd be a great length of time before the child was old enough to marry them. And so she says, you know what? It's best for you all to stay here. You can find another husband. You can get on with your life. And I'll go back to the land of Israel. Well, Orpah, after crying and kissing her, goes back. But Ruth clings to Naomi. And it's there that we find the most well-known verses found in the book of Ruth, where we see the commitment that Ruth had towards Naomi. In verse 16, it says, "But Ruth said, 'Do not urge me to leave you or turn back from following you, for where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Thus may the Lord do to me, and worse, if anything but death parts you and me.'" What a great commitment Ruth makes to Naomi. She says, I'm going to go where you go, and I'm going to live life with you. And even if I have to die, I want to die and be buried with you. And so this shows a great commitment from Ruth to Naomi. And we might ask ourselves, what caused this great commitment to Naomi? Was it because this was the logical choice? Was it because Ruth considered her pros and cons and considered the situation and thought about, okay, this is what my life will be like in Moab versus this is what my life will be like in Israel. And therefore, in considering the pros and cons, decided to go with Naomi? Well, that doesn't seem to be the case, at least not from the way that Naomi considers it, because she says, the most logical thing is for Ruth and for Orpah to stay there in the land of Moab. That's where they would have the greatest possibility for flourishing and so on and so forth. So it wasn't a logical choice. And it wasn't necessarily just because out of habit or some type of, method of life that Ruth wanted to follow her. I think the answer to why Ruth wanted to follow Naomi is very simple and fairly obvious, but very important. It was because she loved her. It was the love that Ruth had for Naomi that caused her to make this statement of commitment to her. It wasn't necessarily the logical choice, but it was a choice made out of love for Naomi. And as we think about that from our standpoint as Christians, we got to understand too that our greatest commitment to Christ is based on love. If our commitment to Christ is based on anything other than love, it will waver, it will fall short, it will turn away during hard times. But if our commitment to Christ is based on love, it'll be substantial and it'll be long-lasting. And this is important for us to understand, not just initially when we come to Christ, but our day-to-day living before Christ. Oftentimes, perhaps we think that, well, I'll be more committed to Christ if I follow some type of protocol. If I read this many chapters a day in my Bible, if I pray this many times, or I spend this much time in worship or whatever. And we think that perhaps if I can just follow some type of protocol, it'll increase my commitment to Christ. And so we go about these various protocols only to find out that our commitment doesn't increase a whole lot. Or we might think that knowledge is important. We think, well, okay, I need to increase in my Bible knowledge. I need to increase in my theology, my understanding of theology. And we think that the more knowledge that I have about Christ, the more and more I'll be committed to Christ. And both of those things, of course, have a part to play in our commitment to Christ. Anyone who's followed this group long enough knows that I'm very much into following these spiritual disciplines, engaging in the spiritual disciplines, and following certain protocol that will help us to draw close to Christ, and then also in increasing our knowledge of God's Word, being in God's Word, and that sort of thing. Of course, those things are important, but ultimately what's going to increase our commitment to Christ is to have a deep, abiding love for Christ. All the other things that we might engage with, if they're done without love for Christ, will just be activities we're involved in just like everything else. And when it comes down to it, when a decision has to be made, and we really want to make a decision based upon our own desires and in contradiction to what Christ would have us to do, if we don't have a deep abiding love for Christ, simply following some protocol isn't really going to help us a whole lot, absent of love. But if we love Christ and we love him with all of our heart, we love him with every fiber of our being, and we just are in awe of Christ, and we're filled with thanksgiving and love for Christ for what he's done for us, and we live with that in the forefront of our minds, and our hearts are saturated with the love of Christ, that's where true commitment is going to come out. And that's what's going to make following certain protocols and spiritual disciplines and reading the Bible and increasing our knowledge, that's where those types of activities will become powerful in our lives and propel us all the more into the arms of Christ. But the foundation of it all is love for Christ. Remember in the book of Revelation, the church at Ephesus had a lot of knowledge, and they knew doctrine, and they stood up against false doctrine, but they had lost their first love. And we don't want to be those who have lost our first love. We want to go back to loving Christ with all of our heart, loving Christ with all of our mind, loving Christ with all of our strength, and being devoted to him on a basis of love. So Ruth here gives us a great example of what it means to be committed to another individual. It's done out of love, even when it doesn't necessarily seem logical to others. Even when it doesn't seem to make sense to others, it makes perfect sense when it's based on love. And so hopefully we'll be inspired to love Christ all the more and be more committed to him because of it. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.